All right, it's the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and, of course, message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com talking about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. And some days are busier than others. Yesterday was certainly one of those. But anytime anything happens in Pitt sports, the place you want to be as a Pitt fan is the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. Of course, you know what we always ask you to do right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you can keep up on everything we do at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You'll never miss one of these Morning Pitt videos that we release every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Never miss our Wednesday night live show. We'll have that tomorrow night with our good friend Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com. And never miss anything else we post. I mean, if you scroll through the videos, we've done a lot of stuff here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You don't want to miss any of it, so make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click that subscribe button. It's right down there. Click the like button over there on this video in particular. We'd appreciate that. And it's good to have you here with us this morning, or this afternoon, this evening, whenever it is that you watch these videos or listen to the podcast. Good timing yesterday. Good timing on doing the video that we did for yesterday's Morning Pitt, where we talked about grading Pitt's offseason, how Jeff Capel's done this offseason. And in my defense, I spent most of that time talking about the transfers and the two transfers they brought in and how that compares to last year's transfers and what kind of grade we would give them on the transfer situation and their work in the transfer portal this year, this offseason. So that video is still relevant. You should go watch that video. But sure enough, a few hours after we released that video, maybe not a few, maybe about 7 or so, news came out, and there was more movement in the offseason, another addition to the 2023-2024 roster, and it's a high school kid. So yesterday's video, almost all about transfers, but there was a point or two where I talked about how they had 2 scholarships available, and I was pretty sure they weren't going to give any of them to a high school player because, I mean, that's what my sources were telling me, that they were not going to take any more high school kids. They were just going to focus on transfers. Well, things change sometimes, and things change fast sometimes, and sure enough, there's another freshman coming in with this 2023 recruiting class. He's 6'10", 4-star center, Papa Kante out of South Kent, plays with the New York Wrens on the AAU circuit, and he's a 4-star prospect joining this class. The third 4-star prospect joining this class, along with Jalen Lowe and Carlton Carrington. Pitt now has the number 22 recruiting class for the class of 2023, the number 3 in the ACC. And what was already a really good recruiting class just got a whole lot better, and it happened kind of out of nowhere. Papa Kante had signed with Michigan, I think back in November he signed. So he's been signed for a while. Earlier this month, just a little less than 3 weeks ago, he asked out of his letter of intent from Michigan, received his release, went back on the market, and there was talk that Memphis might be one of the options for him. Maryland might be one of the options for him. I think Rutgers was considered to be a possible option for him. And then out of the blue, seemingly, there's Pitt. I think there probably wasn't a lot of talk about Pitt for a few reasons. One, I mean, it was, and you can go back and find some of the tweets from early on after Papa Kante received his release from his letter of intent. And you can see that Pitt wasn't really listed as one of the schools that was in contact or one of the schools he was involved with. But they were involved early on. They were involved back when he made his commitment to Michigan in the first place. They were one of the top 5. They got a visit from him last fall, and so he was on campus. He had seen everything and had that established relationship both with the Pitt coaching staff as a whole, Jeff Capel, of course, in particular, and then Gilbert Brown, who works on Pitt's staff and had been one of the coaches at South Kent previously. So there were connections there. There was a familiarity with the campus, familiarity with the program and the coaching staff. And by all accounts, from everything we can tell, he decided to give Pitt a call and say, hey, still got a spot for me? And they obviously talked through and worked it out. And now there's another 4-star prospect, top 100 recruit, joining Pitt's roster this fall. He'll probably join this summer officially, but it'll be part of Pitt's roster this fall. winter and spring this 2023-24 season, and you've got what looks like Jeff Capel's best recruiting class. I don't really know where the competition would come from. There's 3 4-star prospects in a class of 4 recruits, and number 4 was Marlon Barnes, who was a pretty good recruit himself. He was a 4-star at one point. So you've got a really good recruiting class now, a highly rated recruiting class, joining the returning 6 guys that we've talked about, Dior Johnson and Blake Hinson in particular, in addition to, Federico and the Diaz-Graham twins, Will Jeffers coming back from injury. And then you get the 2 transfers coming in, Ishmael Leggett and Zach Austin, and by golly, you're putting together a real roster here. We'll talk about the roster as a whole in a second. Let's talk about Papa Kante and what he's going to bring to this Pitt roster and Pitt lineup in 2023 and 24. He's a 6'10", 225-pound center, number 87 overall recruit in the class, number 7 center prospect in the class. And he's known more for his defense and rebounding than he is for his offense. I think over the last year, he's attempted to improve his offense by everything you read and everything I've seen and read and heard and been told. And he's tried to branch out and become more of an offensive weapon, face up against the basket, and even step out, try and extend his game and be inside-outside. He's tried to do that, but his calling card is defense. His calling card is rebounding, rim protection, shot blocking. He's a 6'10" guy, reportedly with a 7'4" wingspan is the thing that you're always going to read and you're going to hear about a million times, is that big wingspan. But, you watch the videos, you watch some of the tape of him playing, and if his wingspan's not 7'4", it's close enough that we'll call it that. It'll do until a 7'4" wingspan shows up. If it sounds a little bit, he runs the floor well, he can get up and down the court, and I think just with some of the descriptors, and it doesn't entirely play out when you watch him, but some of those descriptions I think probably are a bit reminiscent of Federico. Defensive player, rim protection, rebounding, although rebounding wasn't necessarily a strength of Federico's this past season. Runs the court well. Can screen, switch. I think there are some similarities in the game. I think Papa Kante looks a little bit stronger, at least playing against the competition he's playing against now, and admittedly that'll change once he gets into the ACC. But I think he's a guy who you're bringing him in, and again, we'll talk about his fit in the lineup in a second, but I think you're bringing him in as a guy who's pretty established as a defender and a rebounder, and you're looking to develop his offensive game over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. I don't think you bring him in right now looking to step into the starting lineup. I don't think he's jumping Federico. I don't think he's jumping Guillermo Diaz-Graham. What he is doing is he's coming in as a highly touted kid with a ton of potential and a lot of upside and a pretty high ceiling to grow into being a really effective ACC player. And in the meantime, before he gets there, he can come off the bench and give you defense and give you rebounding and at the very least, give you 5 fouls. And I think after Pitt got Ishmael Leggett and Zach Austin, as everyone's sort of been sitting around twiddling their thumbs for the last month, the recurring theme among Pitt fans was, well, they could use another big guy. They could use somebody big inside who can help with the rebounding. And I think Papa Kante does that to some extent. Now, I've said that I think this team could be a better rebounding team than last year's team as a whole. I think the rebounding numbers can improve because the guys they added, Ishmael Leggett and Zach Austin, I think will be a rebounding improvement over the players who were playing those positions last year, the 2 and the 3. I think you'll get more rebounding production out of the 2 and the 3 spots this year than you did last year. So the overall rebounding should improve, partially because you add those guys. And then I think Federico, Guillermo Diaz-Graham, Jorge Diaz-Graham will be better rebounders this season than they were last season. Not necessarily because they're going to pack on all the strength that everybody thinks they will. I think there's a ceiling to how much stronger you realistically can get, and those guys are probably going to bump into that ceiling at some point. But I think after playing a year in the ACC, playing a year of college basketball, getting to experience all the different centers that they went against over the course of 35 games or whatever it was, after all of that, I think they'll be better rebounders just from that experience. They understand what it takes and how to play the game and how to attack the basket and how to function on the court as rebounders. I think they'll be a little bit better. So I think if you get Federico and the Diaz-Graham twins a little bit better as rebounders, I think if Blake Hinson makes a little improvement, and again, we're just sort of assuming he's going to be back, and then you have these two other guys, you have Leggett and Austin, who can improve the rebounding. I think they'll be a better rebounding team overall. Now, what you've got with Papa Kante is if you want to bring in someone either to serve for more defense or more rebounding, or because you are in trouble with Federico and Guillermo Diaz-Graham, foul trouble or injury or something like that, now you've got a guy who can bring off the bench. And while he may or may not be ready to contribute for you offensively as a freshman, he should be able to go in there and hang defensively, offer some rim protection, offer to work on the glass, and if nothing else, he gives you 5 more fouls from a big guy, which is not the worst thing to have, So I think that's how he fits with this year's team. I think that's what he'll do this year. I've seen some suggestion, this 4-star guy, he's going to come in and he's just going to step right into the starting lineup. I don't think he's going to step into the starting lineup. I'm not even sure if he's going to step over Guillermo Diaz-Graham. I saw a suggestion on the message board, and I was reading through the different threads, a suggestion of, maybe this allows Guillermo Diaz-Graham to move to the 4, and Guillermo and Jorge could both play the 4, and Blake Hinson could play the 3. I still just can't get on board with this fascination with the idea of moving Blake Hinson to the 3 for a lot of reasons. I mean, not the least of which defense, and particularly because if you think about last year, if you put Blake Hinson on a team facing Pitt last year, he'd be trying to defend like Nike Sabandi. How's that matchup going to go? Is Blake Hinson going to defend Nike Sabandi? Now, not every team has a player like Nike Sabandi at that position that he would need to defend, but a lot do. A lot play with 3 guards. A lot have that smaller 3 who can take you off the dribble, and I think Blake Hinson can be beat that way. I think he got a lot of positive, or I should say favorable matchups playing at the 4. I think it was better for him defensively, and it also gave him a better opportunity maybe to get in and get after some rebounds. He ended up leading the team in rebounding last year. So I think Blake Hinson stays at the 4. And again, we talk about this quite a bit, but for whatever distinction exists between the 4 and the 3, because the way Pitt uses it, it's sort of, 2, 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5. It's not quite as drastic a difference. They're not entirely interchangeable, but it's not a huge difference. It's not impossible to separate, or it's not impossible to sort of blend those two positions together. But I still think the matchups he's going to get as the 4 will probably be more favorable than the ones he'll get as the 3 on both ends of the court. So I don't see Papa Kante coming in and being the number 2 center, pushing Guillermo Diaz-Graham out to the wing, which, Jeff Capel has been pretty consistent saying that he's not a wing. He's a center, and Jorge is a wing. And so, Jorge I could see playing the 4 or the 3, but that's not going to be affected by Papa Kante and how he fits into the lineup here. I think he's going to be working with Guillermo Diaz-Graham as the backups to Federico. There'll be a rotation there. He'll get some minutes, and he should. You don't want to run Federico and Guillermo Diaz-Graham into the ground. And again, you're going to have foul trouble. You'll have a game where Federico picks up 2 fouls in the first 3 minutes. And you're not going to play Guillermo for the next 17 minutes. But now, with a guy like Papa Kante on the bench, you've got the flexibility where you don't have to, whereas previously it might have been either, okay, you're going to play either Guillermo 17 minutes, you're going to bring Federico back in for some minutes, playing with 2 fouls, or you're going to have Jorge get minutes at the 5, which is not what they want to do. Well, now you don't have to do any of those options. Now you have another option where if Federico gets hurt, or he gets 2 fouls early in a half or something, you can ride the rest of the half with Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Papa Kante. You've got another viable option to put out there. And he just so happens to have a ton of upside, a really high ceiling, and loads of potential. So, There is nothing not to like about this pickup. I mean, seriously, I don't think they were going to be able to get another freshman guard. I don't think they were going to be able to get a high school guard, and I don't know if they were necessarily all that strongly interested in looking for one. With Dior Johnson effectively as a freshman, as we've said, plus Jalen Lowe and Carlton Carrington as freshmen, you didn't need another freshman guard. And I think at the same time, it was going to be tough to go find that center, a transfer center, who you could convince to come in and be like the third center. Not many guys are transferring to be the number 3 on the depth chart. But a high school center, one with a lot of potential, high ranking, pretty good pedigree, pretty good player. A guy who can do a couple things really well and probably can step in and do those things at an ACC level. Boy, I could think of a lot worse uses for your 12th scholarship on the board. I mean, Pitt came into this morning with 11 scholarships, 2 open. They've now used their 12th scholarship, and they used it on a 4-star prospect, a top 100 kid, a top 10 center in the country, and a guy who can probably come in and hang on defense and rebounding in the ACC. He's not bad. Jeff Capel. When I did the grading yesterday, gave him a grade on his offseason. I was mostly just grading the transfer work, but might have to bump that grade up a little bit based on landing Papa Kante, in addition to Lowe and Carrington, who they already have in the class. So, I mean, this roster is filling out. We'll talk about this another time, but, honestly, and I don't know if you could have said this last year. I think there would have been a few answers, but it really doesn't look like there's a lot, if any, dead weight on this roster. Scholarship-wise. I mean, they have 12 guys. We'll see what number 13 ends up being, but they just filled their 12th scholarship with a top 100 recruit and a guy who could probably come in and play right away in a reserve role at worst. It's not bad roster building there. That's some pretty good roster building by Jeff Capel this offseason between the transfers, the high school recruiting. Pitt's got it rolling right now. They're putting together what should be a pretty good team. And I mean, I like the looks of this team before they added Papa Kante, and I certainly don't like them I certainly don't like them less because they added a 4-star guy in late May. So 12 scholarships full, one more out there. Probably going to be a transfer guard is my guess, but I also told you yesterday they weren't going to take another high school guy. So, woo! Maybe don't listen to me. But I think it'll be a transfer guard. I think that's where the efforts will continue to be. And if they really can't find a guy that they like, they'll try and get like a transfer wing or who knows, maybe another big. See what they can figure out. Or give the scholarship to walk on. You could do something like that too. But Papa Kante, he is in, and Pitt now has 12 players on scholarship. Pretty good Monday for Jeff Capel. See what he's got coming up here in a few days when the dead period ends and recruits and transfers can start visiting again. We'll see what direction the Pitt staff goes in. Maybe they'll get this thing wrapped up by, I don't know, beginning of June, mid-June. Maybe they'll have the roster all locked in. We'll see how it goes. But appreciate you tuning in today for this episode of The Morning Pitt. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks for checking out this morning. Hope you had a great Monday, a good start to the week, and hope your Tuesday's even better. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning for The Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.